So good evening, everyone. This segment of tonight's webinar looks at another facet of fire smart gardening in a drought year. Typically, we think of the Marin County Defensible Space Rules as focused on ensuring that the fire department has access to your home and can protect it from an advancing fire. But we're going to talk about a twist. We're going to make use of those same rules, but we're going to apply them to another landscape maintenance priority, and that is your safe escape from your home to your vehicle. Our objective is to make sure that you know how to evaluate all the plants along each escape route and how to make any necessary changes. We'll stress the spacing between your landscape plants, as Faye has already mentioned, and the amount of dense and dry fuel within each of them. We're going to go through 4 steps. We're going to identify the escape routes to your vehicle. We're going to assess the health and condition of the plants along each route. We're going to apply the defensible space guidelines that both Rich and Faye have introduced. And we're going to talk about a favorite Marin Master Gardener mantra: maintenance, maintenance, maintenance. So our hope is that tonight, while it's still light, or tomorrow, you'll feel motivated and qualified to perform all of these tasks. So what's the concern? Let's set up a scenario. Unfortunately, it's not fanciful. This has happened to thousands of homeowners in Northern California in just the past few years. It's after midnight, you're asleep, you wake to the sound of embers hitting your roof, you look outside and see fire approaching, you need to get to your vehicle and leave. If your vehicle is in an attached garage, you'll likely have no trouble whatsoever. And I should say here, if your vehicle is in an attached garage and you're leaving, make sure you close that door, because it's a barrier to flames that might otherwise get into your garage. So if, however, your vehicle is in the driveway, or it's in an attached garage, or in the street, you may have to escape along some walkway or pathway or some densely vegetated area of your property that could potentially be on fire. So to give this possibility some context, imagine that this is your home. Or if you have a detached garage, imagine that this little shed is the garage. So notice how dense the landscaping is around this home. If you come out the front door and you don't have an attached garage, the shed in this instance would be your detached garage, then your car could be in the driveway, it could be out on the street here, or it could be in this detached garage. Let's look a little further. Although the landscape in this image is not as densely vegetated as in the previous image, it makes the point. You could wake up to an ember storm. And in that case, some of your escape routes already could be difficult to use. So again, for example, if this shed is your detached garage and you typically approached it from the back door across the deck, that option most likely would be unavailable. In this image, the embers are concentrating on that side of the house. Or you could wake up to a fire almost up against your home. Obviously, then in this image, any escape out the back is foreclosed. So with these concerns in mind, let's address and resolve them. And it's just not difficult. We're going to go through each of the 4 steps that were referenced earlier, and we're going to ensure your safe passage from your home to your vehicle. So how are you going to do this? You, in step 1 here, You're literally going to walk entirely around your home, and you're going to identify all the routes that you might follow. You're going to include exit doors or exiting through windows, and you're going to want to follow those routes all the way to places where your vehicle might be. This is for the homeowner who does not have an attached garage. Again, if the car is in that garage, a safe escape is very likely. But if it's outdoors, then you're going to have to make sure that all of the steps you would take to get from your home to the places where your vehicle are cleared of dense, flammable vegetation. It's a good idea to create a map of your escape routes and to make sure that everyone who's in the home is familiar with them too. And I should use this slide. It's a good place to mention that if you find yourself subject to a red flag warning, then the best advice is to make sure that your vehicle is gassed up and that you have faced it towards the street and that you've parked it in some place where it will be the most accessible to you. So now that we have the routes identified, let's assess all the plants along the route. You want to note their health. Are they well hydrated? Do they show signs of drought stress? These are issues that Faye has mentioned. Faye's also mentioned their spacing. How close are they horizontally? Are they touching? How close are they to plants above? Could a flame from below ignite vegetation above? And then you also want to note their individual density. A single plant could contain a lot of dead branches. And you also don't want to forget to look under the plant. Are there dead leaves? Are there twigs? And Faye and I are a broken record on the point of using mulch. Is the surface of the soil beneath that plant, those plants covered with mulch? Again, you don't want to use wood bark mulch in the 0 to 5 foot zone. You want to use compost or some other flammable, non-flammable material. And then finally, you want to note how far those plants are from your home or other structure along each route, because the defensible space guidelines or recommendations are based on that distance. You can see from this slide a depiction of the zones, 0 to 5 feet, closest to the home, the 5 to 30 feet, and then beyond 30 feet to 100. The purpose for this slide is to show you that depending on your home, you could find that the 5 to 30 foot space, and certainly the 30 to 100 foot space, extends to your neighbor's property. Therefore, cleaning up your escape routes may require that you get together and work out a plan to address each of your needs, that is, your needs and the needs of your neighbor. Zone 0 is the most restrictive. Currently, the recommendation is no vegetation in this area and no tree branches that extend into this area. But it's important that you should know that this recommendation is changing and you should check with your local fire department. The recommendations seem to be evolving to the point where it may be permitted to allow within the 0 to 5 foot zone, low growing, well hydrated, non-woody plants combined with non-combustible mulch, such as compost, gravel, or stones. This is also a good time to mention that all wood bark mulch, including both 3/4 inch bark mulch and gorilla hair, is combustible. Faye mentioned this, but we can't overstress it. Wood bark mulch of any kind should not be used in zone 0. Finally, you want to remove debris from the corners and where the walls meet the ground. And if you look at that, there's a possibility that flame could get underneath and behind the siding and create a fire behind the exterior wall. In zone 1, the recommendation regarding wood bark mulch is not to avoid it altogether, but to avoid shredded bark mulch, again, gorilla hair. But I should accent that because all wood bark mulch is combustible, homeowners should be aware of that combustibility and decide whether to use it even in zone 1. If you do use wood bark mulch in this zone, one way to reduce the fire risk is to break up the mulched areas with hardscape, like gravel, brick, or decomposed granite. And then again, you want to focus on the distancing between the plants, and you want to limb up branches 6 to 10 feet or 1/3 of their height. Zone 2 is the furthest out, 30 to 70 feet. Here, the focus is on horizontal and vertical spacing so that the fire doesn't spread sideways or jump into tree branches above bushes and grasses. You want to cut grasses to no more than 4 inches. And again, you want to remove the twig and leaf debris, although currently the recommendation is that you can leave up to 3 inches of mulch material for erosion control. So we've got everything set up. We're ready to apply these defensible space rules, but wait. We want to talk about 3 myths that deter homeowners from making some of these changes. Myth number 1 is fire smart landscapes are not beautiful. Number 2 is prized plants are worth everything and you should try to save them. And the last is that these fire smart changes that we're discussing are just too expensive. But none of these is true. So Faye had a number of images. Here's 2 more. These are fire safe, fire smart landscapes, and they're just flat out beautiful. When it comes to whether plants or people are more important, there's a cute little picture here. Let's assume that the plants behind this family are in the 5-foot zone and they're all from Aunt Tilly. So this family has an emotional attachment to them. But when the Ember fire hits and exit routes to a vehicle are barred or compromised because those plants are on fire, you're going to look back and I can tell you which is more important. It's not those plants. It's the 2 children and the cat and the dog. But we're discussing this now. You have the ability to go out now and make these changes, overcoming some of the emotional attachment that you may have to some of your plants. And lastly, on whether defensible space improvements can be expensive, the opposite is true. If you remove a plant, that's not a difficult thing to do. Some plants can just be moved. You can keep them in your landscape, but just put them in another spot where they don't pose the same risks. Some overgrown plants can be pruned and thinned. If you have replacement plants, keeping in mind Faye's point about the water they use, you can purchase new plants in small containers at little cost. And all of the fixes that we're describing can be performed by the homeowner or by a local gardener. So let's try to make this as practical as we can now by looking at some images of some nearby homes and deciding what could be done with them. This is going to help inform your judgment. So in these 2 images, we're looking at front doors. In the photo on the left, there's dense vegetation in the 0 to 5-foot zone. All the window exits are blocked, and these plants are encroaching on the front door. That front door area could be inflamed given the proximity of the plants to that door. But it doesn't follow from this that this homeowner has to come in and remove all those plants, certainly not right away. I would recommend that the homeowner have these plants professionally pruned to reduce their size and increase their spacing. Once that's done, that actually may be sufficient to provide for a safe escape from the front door to a vehicle. In the photo on the right, you can see that it's much less densely vegetated, although there is growth in the 5-foot zone. Embers falling from the sky likely would pass through this Japanese maple on the right. Although some thinning is always recommended to make sure that there's not too much fuel in a tree like that. But at the very least, this homeowner should remove the dry wreath on the front door because that's ignitable. And if you can see it, there's prayer flags hanging from the front. Those also could catch fire and pass embers down right in front of the front door as they might want to leave. Let's look at a secondary escape route. In this home, the picture on the left is coming from a side door and moving out towards the front door. The image on the right is the growth on the left of the left-hand picture. So if we stay in the left-hand picture, there is still growth in the 5-foot zone. It's not particularly dense. The real culprit here is the dense vegetation on the left side. So let's look at the right-hand image where we get a better vision of it. Some of these plants are dead and they can simply be removed. And I'll repeat something that Faye mentioned, which is important. If you remove a dead plant and it has an emitter watering it, that emitter should be plugged. The remaining plants are just too close, but this landscape doesn't have to be decimated. Some of those plants should be removed. Some of them could be planted elsewhere in the garden, so they'd be preserved. And those that remain on this shallow slope should be pruned to thin them out and to remove their thick thatch of fuel. And again, looking underneath and pulling out any debris and leaves that might also catch fire. Let's look at one last image. This is a pathway to a detached garage. The gravel path is great, but look at that plant on the left. It contains a lot of dead material for the entire length of the path. That thatch of dead material should be removed. And you can't quite see it in this image, but it's a great place to raise another point. Look up when you're reviewing your escape routes. There may be dry material overhead on an arbor or just over a gate, and that dry material may also need to be removed. We could go further with other images, but I'm going to halt at this point because the goal was to give you a sense of what you're looking for and what you're trying to do in each zone, what you're trying to accomplish.